Valve doesn't care about CSGO. You can find comments reflecting this sentiment all over Reddit and the rest of the internet. The list of complaints is generally as follows. The last operation was way back in 2021. Valve refuses to switch matchmaking servers over to 128 tick despite years of fans asking and the minimal effort it would require. CSGO's anti-cheat systems are significantly below the standard set by its competitors. The skill-based matchmaking system is kinda broken, filled with smurfs. Sometimes people get stuck at ranks above their skill level and don't rank down, so they're just getting rolled over and over again. A lack of separate servers in key geographical territories causing problems not only with ping but also with a language barrier.
I'm from England, America!
Especially with Russia and Europe sharing the same server region. CSGO is a team game, and the fact that rolling teammates who actually speak the same language as you is complete RNG is a pretty poor design choice. I found that by the time I stopped playing the game in any real capacity earlier this year, it was to the point where it seemed like everyone in Europe had simply decided to stop trying to comm at all, and most of my games were played in helpless silence. Agent skins blatantly fly in the face of the competitive integrity of the game, drastically damaging the readability of player models and giving players with more money a small but incredibly frustrating gameplay advantage. Don't worry, before you click off, this isn't actually a video where I complain about the state of Counter-Strike. I think the opening statement is wrong. Valve doesn't not care about CSGO. They've consistently continued to update the game with bug fixes, changes and fixes to existing maps, rotating in new maps, weapon balance changes, promoting the esports scene, and are currently actively porting the game to Source 2, the main advantage of which is not actually graphical enhancement itself, but the streamlining of Valve's ability to continue supporting the game in the modern landscape with its expectations for quality and performance. But notice I said Valve doesn't not care. I didn't say it cared. Perhaps there are individual people, programmers and artists working at Valve who deeply care about the game and its community. In fact, I'm certain there are. But Valve as a company? How can we even determine what it means for an inhuman collective ostensibly motivated primarily by the goal of maximal capital accumulation to care about anything? What would it look like if it did? What would it look like if it didn't? I only just started playing Team Fortress 2. I wouldn't say I'm particularly great at it. In fact, I still don't really understand how to play half the classes properly, and I have a tendency to hold W directly into the thick of the opposing team and get wiped out repeatedly. I want to tell you why I've just now fallen in love with this 16-year-old game, and to do that we need to go back in time a little bit. In 2016, I got my first desktop PC. I had a friend from school build it with me, well, really for me. It ran Windows 7 and didn't do it particularly well. At some point on that computer I ran across a YouTube video, a speedrun of Half-Life 1 at GDQ 2014 by the runner Cool Kid. I knew of the existence of the Half-Life franchise and had even seen some gameplay of Half-Life 2, although having never been allowed to play video games on anything other than handheld consoles as a kid, I never touched them. Watching this run I was immediately captivated by its most consistent feature, bunny hopping. I remember feeling that this was somehow a real speedrun, that this is what a speedrun should look like. I ended up buying the game for myself to learn the run. This is where I learned to b-hop. I was very bad at Half-Life 1 speedrunning. In fact, I never even had one successful completed run. I practiced for months and got semi-consistent at the earlier stages, even learning some intermediate skips and tricks, but my runs would always fall apart after the stage on a rail and I would always reset. It never occurred to me to make practice saves later in the game so I could learn those parts without having to do it from the beginning every time. In the end, running the game was more frustrating than fun, and eventually I said to myself that if I didn't have a completed run by the end of the month, I would give up on trying. This isn't supposed to be a sad story, it just wasn't for me, and I'd later come to learn that I much prefer grinding short individual level speedruns over longer full game runs, but that was the first game I'd ever tried to speedrun. Just another in the long list of commitments which I had underestimated. Looking back, I didn't want to learn to be a good Half-Life speedrunner. I just wanted to have learned to be a good Half-Life speedrunner. It would take another few years for me to identify that pattern of thought and behaviour in myself and start to address the challenge of sorting out what I wanted to do from what I wanted to want to do. I do not remember how it happened, but it was at around this time when I discovered CSGO. And just like with Minecraft years before, I watched YouTube videos about CSGO for months before I actually bought the game. War Owl, 3Clicks Philip, Nick Bunyan, Jericho I would guzzle up any information or gameplay I could get my hands on. I preferred this style, more focused on the actual game, compared to more funny moments, banter-oriented content from people like Smitty. But my favourite was a guy called Sparkles. Now, this guy seems to have completely transitioned his channel to be focused on skin gambling now, but back then he would upload compilations of clips sent to him by fans. The ones which drew me in particularly were Ninja Defuse montages. For the uninitiated, in CSGO, for the CT side to win, they must defuse a bomb, which the T side tries to defend. A ninja defuse is when, rather than defeating the terrorist team and then defusing the bomb, you try to hide on site while they plant and then defuse the bomb when they're not looking, often by throwing a smoke grenade over yourself. This is a very trolly way to run around, and it mostly comes down to hoping the enemy team is bad enough that they just don't really check the site very well. When I did eventually buy the game, it wasn't free yet at that point, this is what I tried to do. I spent most CT rounds hiding in spots I'd seen from Sparkle's videos and trying to ninja defuse, much to the dismay of my teammates. Sometimes it would work, most of the time it wouldn't. I wasn't doing this so I could record clips to send them to Sparkles in the hopes of being featured in a compilation, or to upload them myself. I was doing it because this is what seemed to be the most fun. Eventually, the player base seemed to catch on to all the hiding spots and figured out how to more effectively spam through smoke to kill me while defusing, and a few of the maps with good hiding spots got updates which removed them, so ninja defusers stopped being even a semi-viable playstyle even in low ranks. At some point, however, I'd figured out that those bunny hopping skills I'd learned in Half-Life were transferable over to Counter-Strike. To this day, I still bind jump to scroll wheel even in games which don't have B-hops, just because I'm so used to it. CSGO is a lot less B-hop friendly than Half-Life is. There's a harsh speed cap, meaning even perfect hops only give you a small boost in speed, and good luck landing those because every hop you land is actually a coin flip. See, Valve servers run at 64 tick, in other words, they check the state of everything going on 64 times a second. In order to B-hop, you have to input a plus jump on the same tick as you land. This is too precise to reliably do with just one input on a spacebar, so instead we bind jump to the scroll wheel, meaning you can scroll at the right time to send a flurry of plus jump commands in succession. However, you can't send 2 plus jump commands on 2 consecutive ticks, because that would just be the equivalent of holding down the spacebar. You wouldn't actually continuously jump, it only counts the first input. So in between every notch the scroll wheel hits, after sending a plus jump command, it sends a minus jump command on the next tick. Landing on a tick when you're sending a plus jump will result in a perfect B-hop, but landing on a tick where the game is reading a minus jump command means you lose your momentum. And since this is on the scale of 64ths of a second, it's too precise for a human to consistently control, and therefore it's effectively a 50-50 chance that you hit each hop. Nonetheless, just as I like to gamble on whether I'd be spotted hiding for a ninja defuse, the thrill of chaining successful hops was alluring to me. As the years went on playing CSGO, I became less and less focused on winning games and more focused on moving in cool ways, which you would think would have led me to the community-made movement-specific game modes like Surf, B-Hop and KZ, but those never really clicked with me in the same way. Eventually I found myself gravitating towards the map DE Nuke more and more, an obvious choice for movement-oriented playstyle given its wide open spaces and verticality. At this time I was throwing games. I decided, after a rough patch of getting increasingly mad every time I lost a game resulting in me quitting for months, that I no longer cared about concepts such as winning or ranking up. Instead, my goal was to get kills in funny ways and troll lower ranked players, standing on unaware enemies' heads, getting kills with a Zeus or knife, only buying Deagle, trying to B-hop everywhere I went. It was a fun time. Much alcohol was consumed. Eventually, just as I was starting to get bored of the game, a YouTuber by the name Franz J would blow up, and I would discover that not only am I not alone in my playstyle, I'm also not particularly good at it. This reinvigorated me to focus more on improving my movement, learning ladder tech, practicing on long jump servers, learning to hit surfs at the strange geometries of DE Nuke, and discovering the edge bugs which I'd known about from Half-Life 1 were actually possible in CSGO as well. As time dragged on, I once again began to tire of the game. The player base had grown in the opposite direction to me. Where I had spent the last few years trying to escape the pressure of winning games and ranking up in favour of a more casual playstyle, maximising pogs per minute, the community was growing increasingly competitive and self-serious. I also felt limited by the game. I wanted to push the Source engine to its limits, to go faster and jump higher, and for that to actually be rewarded in anything other than an abrupt death. Then, the Save TF2 movement happened, and I found out that the game I'd been wanting had been staring me in the face the whole time. When I got that first desktop PC back in 2016, I had briefly played TF2. When presented with the class selection screen, I had no idea what to pick, so I googled what the easiest TF2 class was for beginners. The internet seemed to agree that Pyro and Heavy fit that description, so that's what I played. I was unsuccessful with Pyro, but as heavy I could consistently get kills. After all, I just had to follow the players with my mouse, it wasn't that hard. This got pretty boring fast, and I ended up basically forgetting about the game until Save TF2 brought it back into my mind. Then, the final straw which made me want to play TF2. I was watching a video by 3Clicks Philip about CSGO on the Steam Deck when he mentioned another video called Controllers in TF2. They don't suck, here's why. So curious, I went over and watched that video. It's a great video, and in it I saw the creator, SolarLite, flying around maps at lightning speed. I want to do that, I thought. So I watched some more of SolarLite's videos and found out that this technique was called trimping. This is what sold me on TF2. This movement technique had everything I wanted. It was flashy and not in the traditional quote-unquote viable way to play, but still effective enough to get kills with skill, and more importantly, it looked really fun and satisfying. I was right, it is incredibly fun and satisfying. Anyway, I now play Hybrid Night and trimp around maps as much as I can, and I have a blast doing it even though I'm not particularly good. If you think Valve doesn't care about CSGO, then what would you call its approach to TF2? There's no question about it, TF2 is basically an abandoned game. Valve servers are so full of instant headshotting bots that they're completely unplayable, and Valve doesn't seem very interested in fixing this. But TF2 has something a lot of other games lack: very good community server support and a player base passionate enough to run them. Uncletopia is just better than Valve Casual. Skyle 24/7 Dust Bowl servers are as close as you can come to staring directly into the totality of the transcendental.
In a world of constant self-aggrandizement and unlimited digital pleasure, why would anyone choose a good map when they could choose Dust Bowl instead?
Don't we love Valve for this? They give us community server support, they integrate community maps and skins into our games, they support the right to repair on their hardware. Oh, how wonderful Valve is. They may not have the resources to support their game directly, but they hand over the keys to the community freely, who do a better job than they ever could. Do people forget that there were no Valve official servers in Counter-Strike 1.6 and Source? Those games did just fine. So is Valve actually the good guy in the end? Look how much they support and embrace community creations. Hell, Team Fortress, Counter-Strike and Dota, 3 of their biggest games, all started life as mods, so of course they see the importance of hosting an open platform, right? Unfortunately, Valve only puts up the facade of supporting community creations and mods up to the point where it threatens to hurt their bottom line. I will present 2 examples. Firstly, Open Fortress. Open Fortress is a mod for TF2 which switches out the class mechanics for something closer to traditional, fast-paced arena shooter deathmatch experience. It's really fun and I highly recommend checking it out. In 2021, Valve forced them to cease distributing the game, likely due to the use of code from a prior TF2 leak. They attempted to switch out all code from the leak with original reverse-engineered code. When they showed this to Valve, Valve requested they shut down the codebase, forcing them to take the project closed source, meaning you won't be able to make your own mods based on the reverse-engineered code. In fact, although I'm finding it hard to track down precise information, it seems like Open Fortress may have originally started as a sort of open source modding platform for TF2, so Valve basically shut down their entire original mission. In May of 2022, Open Fortress reopened the game to the public, not because Valve told them they could, but because Valve simply stopped responding to their emails, and after a while they got fed up and said fuck it. Here are developers who are making every effort to work with Valve, but Valve are refusing to support them and fighting their efforts to create a mod. The second example is Counter-Strike Classic Offensive, a mod for CSGO which aims to combine the best of both worlds of CSGO 1.6. This being a fairly extensive mod of the game, the dev team needs access to parts of the source code in order to make the game work properly. Valve will not give them access to the source code. Not only will Valve not give them a license, it seems as if, just like in the case of Open Fortress, Valve is simply not responding to them when they try to get in contact. This leaves the game in a limbo state. If the devs hack the source code, they can complete their mod, but Valve won't allow it on Steam, massively lowering its capacity to reach a wider player base, which is obviously important for a multiplayer online game. So they're stuck using janky workarounds, knowing that there's a much easier and simpler way to make the game better, but not having the ability to do anything about it thanks to Valve's strategic poor communication. It's obvious why Valve is doing this. Classic Offensive would be a direct competitor for CSGO. You might think, well, since it's a mod, you'd still have to own CSGO to play it, so why does that matter? Put simply, Classic Offensive does not contain skins and cases. Valve is estimated to make over $50 million per month from CSGO case keys alone. Anything that might threaten to hurt that income cannot be tolerated, so they remain purposefully impossible to contact in order to dissuade fans and community from making versions of the game which could distract people from their slot machines, because the truth is this: Valve doesn't care about CSGO or TF2 because Valve doesn't care about video games. Valve isn't a video game company, it's a casino. The games are just a marketing strategy. They allow the community to run their own servers in the hopes that it will keep us buying hats and skins in order to pay for Gabe Newell's second super yacht. I would love to say that this means we can force Valve's hand in making changes to these games by boycotting the skins and hats, but unfortunately, the most likely result of that would just be them seeing the games aren't making them money anymore and shutting them down for good, rather than spending the money to fix it, showing the fans that they have power, which they might encourage them to use it again. Although I strongly recommend you never engage with loot box gaming mechanics or so-called player economies because, well, we all laughed when people were paying for pixels when they were NFTs, and we freak out when NFTs are in video games, but somehow it's okay when Valve do it. And while I'm here shit-talking Valve anyway, I may as well mention something that only I care about. Why hasn't Valve open sourced the Gold Source engine yet? In 2019, a Valve developer wrote on GitHub, quote, "Open sourcing is a possibility," in relation to Gold Source. Remember that Gold Source only exists, Valve only exists, because of based John Carmack releasing the Quake engine under the GPL. And at the time, that was a fairly modern game engine. We ought to be pressuring Valve to release Gold Source under GPL also. I just thought I'd throw that in there. In the game world, we live knowingly beneath an uncaring god. But what about when the situation is even worse? What happens when you live in a world where your god is actively hostile towards you? How can we continue in spite of a vengeful god? I don't play Super Smash Bros. Melee. I installed the game on an emulator once because I wanted to know how wave dashing worked. I learned to wave dash, then uninstalled the game and never played it again. Playing with controller for long sessions hurts my hands, and I'm not big on fighting games anyway, so I don't think the game's for me. That being said, I have nothing but absolute adoration for the game and its community. Nintendo are the vengeful god. Not only is the game even more abandoned than TF2, it hasn't received an update since it came out obviously, and not only is its developer not supporting it, Nintendo are actively hostile to the player base, trying to shut down tournaments. They openly hate that the game is popular, that it's played competitively, and that it competes with the later installations in the franchise. Even the game itself is hostile to its players. Only 6 of its 29 maps are actually allowed by competitive rule set. Only about 12 of its 25 characters are viable, depending on who you ask. Unavoidable and random bugs like the invisible ceiling glitch ruin stocks. Hell, even unmodified GameCube controllers aren't well constructed enough for the precision demanded in high-level Melee, so players often opt for modded controllers with notches and snapback capacitors. And yet, after 22 years, Melee's community is bigger than ever. Melee doesn't have online matchmaking? Fine, we'll do it ourselves. Slippy is literally better than Nintendo's actual online for Ultima, it's not even close. Melee's players and fans have withstood an environment which seems impossible, a niche group of video game fans standing up to a company on the battlefield of that company's own game and winning, albeit only to be constantly thrown back down, like that one Greek guy with the hill and the boulder. But now the happiness on Sisyphus's face no longer needs to be imagined. We can see it for ourselves with every Melee tournament that goes by. Because while Nintendo might have created Melee, it was the players who made it. So do not lose hope, Team Fortress gamers. Our god may have abandoned us, but that won't stop us from pushing that boulder.